Right now, the NBA Draft Combine is going down in the Chicago Bulls' backyard, and we're going to talk about some of the takeaways from the Draft Combine so far, with the Bulls having the number 4th and number 15th pick in this draft, as well as 2 second-rounders. There's a lot of standouts that could be around those picks for the Chicago Bulls. And listen, Caleb Wilson is not doing anything to cool down his draft stock, which could it push him out of the Bulls' range? We'll talk a little bit about that, him and Cam Boozer, and what they showed in this NBA Draft Combine. We're going to get into all that plus more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. And the NBA Draft Combine is going down at the Wintrust Arena, which isn't too far from the United Centers where the Chicago Sky play as well. And with the Chicago Bulls having 4 total picks in this draft, which will be interesting to see if they take all 4 of those picks, if they trade out of them. But we have number 4, number 15, number 38, and number 56 in this draft. This is going to be where Bryson Graham can put an immediate stamp on this roster with it. Now, measurement and drills matter. Interviews are going to be coming up next. The workouts matter even more, I think, when it comes down to it. This is one of the most key evaluation periods that go down. On top of that, this is where all the NBA execs are at one time. And when you hear the number of trade rumors that are popping up, you know, it makes sense because this is where a lot of the groundwork for that stuff starts getting done. So we're going to actually play facts or cap in regard to some of the rumors that have popped up from the Draft Combine so far as well. But let's go ahead and get into it. So first, let's talk about Caleb Wilson. He keeps looking like the perfect fit next to the Chicago Bulls. He's viewed, of course, as one of the most likely picks for the Chicago Bulls at number 4, him and Cam Boozer. And he really did impress at the Draft Combine. He had the elite athleticism in regard to the 39.5 inch max vertical when it came down to it. That's an amazing vertical. Now, I want to be clear here. Not everything comes down to verticality, right? Like athleticism, and I said this on yesterday's episode, there's so much other aspects of athleticism. And I think so many people now try to turn athleticism into just how high you can jump. That's not the only athleticism, right? And I want to be clear on that. But his max vertical absolutely stood out. He had a very strong, agility drill and sprint workout as well in regards to that one. I think that's the part really matters, right? Caleb Wilson, if he is drafted by the Chicago Bulls, and this isn't to knock his offense, right? I want to be clear. Caleb Wilson and what he was able to average without having a solid jump shot, I think actually shows how much of an offensive weapon he could turn into if you get him with the right development coach, you put him in the right situations, you have the right coach to mold him, and it's going to be very much kind of like, I'm not comparing him to Kawhi Leonard. I want to be clear. I'm not comparing him to Kawhi Leonard, but how Kawhi was able to impact the game as he was working on his offense. That's the thing that I'm talking about with Caleb Wilson. And because, athleticism, as far as getting out in transition, being able to run the break, the physicality part of defending really well, these are all going to be things that make a huge, that Caleb Wilson is going to be looked at to make big impacts on early on. This is a player that averaged almost 20 points per game. He was 38th in the entire nation in scoring last year, and he shot 25% from 3, and his mid-range shot was streaky as well. So, there is tons of potential there for Caleb Wilson to continue to develop as an offensive player, but where he's going to make his impact right away, getting in passing lanes, defensively, getting in transition, all those type of things. And it looked really good. All those strengths from Caleb Wilson really stood out in the Draft Combine so far, and even in the jumper drills. Why his 3-point shot in the 3-point shooting drill, he didn't hit a lot of those. We'll talk about Cam Boozer, who definitely stood out more than Caleb Wilson in that particular drill. But his jumper, the mechanics on the jumper, you could tell the mechanics are there right. And any shooting coach will tell you the mechanics are usually the thing they have to work on first. Having solid mechanics means that he has a really good base that if you get him with the right development coach, they're going to be able to work with him. I don't know how good of a shooter Caleb Wilson is eventually going to turn into, but there is enough reason that you can see in his game so far that there are some things that show that, hey, he could probably turn into a decent shooter. And, Caleb Wilson, I don't think ever has to turn into a lockdown three-point shooter. Don't count him out. Anthony Edwards, for example, his three-point shot was one of the things that was a knock on him. Last season, he was one of the most efficient volume three-point shooters, right? And I mean, in 24, 25, 25, 26, he was a decent three-point shooter too. So don't take that away from him. So I think that that's the thing that really stands out in regards to Caleb Wilson, that all the things that are strengths really stood out in those type of drills. And then the jumper looks really good, right? I think that he fits Bryson Graham's style with size, length, athleticism, and physicality. The question that comes really when it comes to Caleb Wilson is he doing so much work that he is not going to be on the board for the Chicago Bulls at number 4? And it's a real possibility of that, right? And I said this on Twitter, so I'm going to say this here, and I don't mean this to knock any Bulls fan or to be disrespectful to any Bulls fan. But I do think that there are so many Bulls fans that as of right now have locked in so much to Caleb Wilson that they're going to think that it's just a bad thing if Caleb Wilson doesn't fall to the Bulls. I need everybody to realize there is a real strong possibility that Caleb Wilson may not be on the board by number 4. If you listen to the draft experts, there is a chance of one of those teams. Now, especially with teams being willing to move, if that ends up happening as well, like trades end up happening, it could open that up even more. So I just want to be clear on that. I get it. He is a stud, and he is definitely the competitiveness, all that type of stuff is definitely reasons why that Bulls fans should be getting excited that Caleb Wilson is the pick by the Chicago Bulls. But I've seen already Bulls fans say things like, it's Caleb Wilson or bust. If that's your mentality coming into the draft, where really you're number 4, and you got to naturally wait for the first 3 picks ahead of you to get picked anyway, you could end up disappointed if you're putting all your eggs into the Caleb Wilson basket, not because of him as a player, but because he's having such a good draft combine that a team could go ahead and say, listen, we think that Caleb Wilson may be the guy to take. Like somebody said that he could be taken as high as number 2, right? So I just want to be clear on that one, right? Caleb Wilson is a dog. I love what we're seeing from him in the draft combine. As I've done my research more and more on the kid, I told you guys earlier in the season when people were like, I don't know if I really would want Caleb Wilson. I'm like, hey man, Caleb Wilson got some stuff, right? But just take a look in that one. That is the biggest question right now for Caleb Wilson is he doing so good in this draft combine that his stock is going to raise so much so that he's taken before the Bulls get a chance to draft him. Next up, though, Cam Boozer. Cam Boozer is looking every bit of the NBA-ready prospect that many Bulls fans said, right? He looked like he belonged at a different level. He is probably the most NBA-ready prospect in this one. And I mean that. Right now, with that said, sometimes that means that the ceiling's a little bit lower. I don't really know if that you can even say that about Cam Boozer. Keep in mind, I'm a guy that I would tell you, Cam Boozer is my least favorite out of the top 4. And that's no knock on him, right? I think, people throw the word hate around so much, and I think it's so childish that, in a draft combine, if you don't understand discernment and the ability to be critical over a player, that it's not hate. Hate would be saying, oh, Cam Boozer is going to be a terrible player, never take him. That's hate. Saying, hey, Cam Boozer's lack of athleticism causes some concerns there. And it's legitimate in that, right? But the frame that he has, I would say this, even in the agility drills, while Caleb Wilson did stand out above him in the measurables, it wasn't that much of a difference that you got to look at it, right? So I think the NBA ready-made body by Cam Boozer stands out. All the well-rounded skills that he has as well. He went 19 of 25 from downtown in shooting drills. When I say that he blew it out the water when you compare the shooting profile of Cam Boozer to Caleb Wilson, Cam Boozer stood out. And so, again, like I said, criticism isn't hate, and you also need to be able to point out the good. It's there. I think the lateral quickness that he showed in drills is good. Now, we do know that drill lateral quickness is different from in-game lateral quickness, but hey, we're talking about everybody on the same level here in the draft combine, and the lateral quickness wasn't that much of a deficit as some people made it out that it could be coming in to this draft combine and the measurables there. So he showed that. I think the athletic drills, he didn't stand out there as much, but that's never going to be his calling card. Like, Cam Boozer is not the most athletic player. That's just the reality of it. That's he would be able to tell you that. Any draft expert would tell you that he is not the most athletic. Now, I've seen some Bulls fans say, well, athleticism didn't stop guys like Luka Doncic. Well, Luka moved to guard to partly help overcome some of that. But you even have guys as well, like, of course, Nikola Jokic. Now, Nikola Jokic is a different generational player, but I think when you look at Cam Boozer's ability to rebound, pass, be a hub on the offensive side of the ball, and what all he can do on the offense, it comes down to that, right? I think his feel, his versatility, his production, and of course, I've said this, one of the biggest pluses that you can give Cam Boozer, he is the best player as far as winning in any of the players in the top 4. He won the most. So if you're talking about somebody who positively impacts winning, he definitely stands out in regards to that one as well. If he does slide to Chicago, if Caleb Wilson goes before the Chicago Bulls pick, and the Bulls look at Cam Boozer and they're like, all right, bet that's some player we're going to take. Then whoever falls out the top 4, he's not just a consolation prize. And I want to be clear, Cam Boozer could very well end up being the best out of it because of the extremely high floor. Now, would I vote on that? No. But I will say this, like, don't overlook just how high the floor is for Cam Boozer and how important that is in an evaluation like this. It is hugely important that you talk about that. Hey, even if the highs of the highs may not be there, this is a guy that's going to come in, and the chances of Cam Boozer being a bust, I think, are very low. The chances of him being like an MVP caliber player out of this, or may not be as high as some either. But, we'll see how that works out. That story's going to be told over years as he grows, as he's developed. He's still really young, too, with all of that. So you have to look at that part with Cam Boozer as well. But let's talk about some of the other players that have stood out in the draft combine. Darryn Peterson, I think his shooting drill was excellent. He had one of the strongest shooting drills. He had a 37.5-inch max vertical as well. And Darryn Peterson just continues to be a player that he's a ball player, man. And I get why some people talk about the personality and their concerns there. I don't want to act like those aren't things that are there. But I tell you what, you can't rule out a world in which Bryson Graham looks at Darryn Peterson, the measurables, the upsides, and says that it's a can't miss. I'm going to say that you can't do that, right? And I think it's easy to see why any team that gets Darryn Peterson could be very lucky to get him. 19 of 25 in the spot-up shooting drills, the 37-inch max vertical when it came down to that. The measurables didn't come in too much lower than you expect either, right? I think that this guy has so much two-way ability in it. And the comparisons to like a guy like Anthony Edwards is legitimately there for Darryn Peterson. And, there could be somebody that ends up talking themselves out of it. And if they do that, that's on them. Another player that I think a lot of Bulls fans have kind of talked themselves into being interested in is Darius Cuff, right? He did come in measuring at 6'2". I do think he has extremely long arms at a 6'7" wingspan when it came down to it. And you could see that it'd be, that it's going to be hard to stop him when he gets ahead of steam. He was 18 of 25 during the spot-up shooting drills as well. It put him behind Bennett Stritz, in regards to that one. He was top 5 in the off-shooting drill as well, which is really good when you talk about him. His scoring upside is there. And I think that it's going to continue to be an interesting thing to see if he's one of the first players drafted outside of the top 4. And that's going to keep him in conversation for the top 5. But I do think that, if the Bulls, aren't as enamored with whoever falls at 4, Bulls fans that say that the Bulls should look at Darius Cuff, the draft combine didn't do anything but help those guys, right? Kingston Flemings, right? I think that Kingston Flemings definitely impressed, right? I think the height came in pretty. He's just a small player. Kingston Flemings is very, very small, right? He had a 41-inch max vertical, which, again, not all the thing. He was the 3rd highest vertical in the class, right? I think that he even in some of the ridiculous things, like he threw in a windmill dunk off his non-dominant hand that barely didn't go in, right? So I think that he's one of the smallest players on the court, but I do think with that, Kingston Flemings has also done some things for him. I just don't think he's really an option there for the Chicago Bulls or at number 5 at all. And then another guy that a lot of Bulls fans love is Keaton Wagler. Keaton Wagler had 0 dunks during his Illini career, which it is. He came in just under 6'6", so his size is legitimate. I do think that when he stepped up to do his max vertical, there were some thoughts that he wasn't going to do very well in there. A 36-inch max vertical, which is way better than people expected him to do as well. He went 25 of 30 in the off-shooting drill, which, again, a lot of people, like if you heard me and Pat's discussion on Keaton Wagler, Pat has kind of a conversation or concerns over what Keaton Wagler can be as an off-ball scorer. In those shooting drills, he looked very crispy when it came down to that. So I think that's really good. But, I think that, for a player like Keaton Wagler, the draft combine did really good for him. He's a tough shot maker. He doesn't have to have the explosiveness of some of the other things. And I think Keaton Wagler did himself a pretty good favor in what he's done in the draft combine for sure. Not to say that means that the Bulls are going to take him at number 4 or anything like that. But, I'm trying to mention some players that Bulls fans have really talked about in regards to that one. But let's talk about some of the players that have stood out that possibly could be on the board for the Bulls at number 15. Jayden Quaintance. He stood out. 6'9", 253 pounds, a 7'5" wingspan. The defensive upside of JQ as something that we've talked about wholeheartedly in this a lot for the Chicago Bulls. And I've said this before. I know I talked about Chris Nick Jr. and Cam Carr on yesterday's episode, but Jayden Quaintance is a guy that from the moment he stepped on the court and at 253 pounds, at 7'3" wingspan, at being, only 18 years old still, I keep telling y'all, if it wasn't for the injuries, he'd be a top 10 pick unequivocally in this draft. And if you draft him at number 15, the upside there, I'm not mad at you betting on the upside. But the concerns over the long-term injury things are absolutely there as well. But the defensive potential, I think, is enough to possibly get you to look in and lock in on him as well at number 15. And then somebody else that stood out to me in the combine that I'm going to admit to you, I did not think at all that I would be talking about in this draft. And that's Allen Graves. The shooting touch that he has, the size, he does have limited explosiveness as well. But I do think that this guy's really stood out as somebody that the Bulls could definitely take a look at number 15. The touch and everything that's there, I don't think you can completely look over him in my personal opinion. And then Koa Peat really kind of stood out as well. His wide frame, the shoulders that he has, the jumper concerns are definitely there. He has all the athleticism in the world, though. And so Koa Peat is another guy that a lot of Bulls fans have continually brought up in this process. And I think at number 15, he still is an option there for the Chicago Bulls. And then you have a couple of guys there in the second round that are worth looking for. Zuby Ejiofor is a guy. The size that he has there, the smooth jumper. Of course, there's some concerns about where he's going to be as an NBA fit. But if you end up taking your pick at 56 or anything like that, I think that's a guy to keep an eye out for as well. And then Tobu Lawau, I believe is how you do it, a 45-inch max vertical. In the 5-on-5s, this guy was moving around all over the court. Very, very raw. I'm going to be clear, extremely raw. This is probably a guy that you would draft, stash away in the G League for maybe 2 years or so. But if you can develop him into any type of role player to come off that bench, I think that's what it's going to end. In the second round, that's where you look at it, whatever you think could be an elite trait, and you use that to stand out. So I do think that you take maybe the less swingy pick at number 38. But if you keep number 56, you can take a big swing there at somebody's real big upside and see what they can turn out to be. So that's what my thought process is. Let me know any guys that have stood out at the draft combine to you so far as well. But then let's get into facts or caps, right? So Josh Giddey trade rumors have popped up again, and this more so popped up because of Brett Siegel being on a podcast in which he mentioned a completely hypothetical, I'm just shooting possibilities out there, and just said, hey, maybe the Bulls do something with Josh Giddey if XYZ. And you've now seen aggregators take this and turn this into the Bulls are like, I can't tell you how many people have left comments on whether it's Twitter or whatever else saying, oh yeah, I'm hearing the Bulls are looking to trade Josh Giddey. Go. And I know that my job here is everybody doesn't have time to go through every rumor and see where it started, where it originated and stuff like that. That is part of the job that I really do feel I have to do here. And this is a lot of cap. The verdict of this is cap for now, right? Like, I can tell you this. I'd be willing to bet 99% Josh Giddey is not going to be traded at all through this offseason process. I'm going to be clear with that. Maybe by the trade deadline, after some time to evaluate, maybe. But I'd be willing to bet on that Josh Giddey's probably not traded the whole entirety first year of Bryson Graham's tenure here with the Chicago Bulls. Separate speculation from sourcing. I think that's a big thing that we have to do here. Just because somebody creates a trade idea on a podcast doesn't mean the Chicago Bulls are shopping Josh Giddey. So we'll see what happens in regards to that one, but cap on that. Ja Morant to the Chicago Bulls and the number 3 overall pick. Now, this all originated from an article on Bleacher Report, which y'all know how I feel about articles on Bleacher Report, and I say that as somebody who works for Bleacher Report in the video part of it, right? But it was floated around in the Bleacher Report article that the Chicago Bulls could get Ja Morant and the number 3 pick. The Memphis Grizzlies will receive Patrick Williams, Isaac Okoro, Rob Dillingham, and the number 4 overall pick. Here's what I'm going to say into this. Yes, the Memphis Grizzlies are going into a rebuild. We know that, right? And that's in this trade, the Bulls aren't giving up the number 15th pick. So number 15. Do you think that the Memphis Grizzlies going into a rebuild want Patrick Williams, Isaac Okoro, Rob Dillingham to move down one spot without the Bulls giving up something of the future? That's how you know this is kind of a speculative article in my personal opinion. So not to say that this is complete cap, right? Do I think that teams are talking about possibilities to move up or back when it comes down to it? But I think Ja Morant's huge contract over the next 2 years. Bryson Graham just told us we're not trying to skip steps in regards to this one. I don't think that this means that this is a reality. The Bulls, just being patient with the rebuild, taking on Morant's contract, and chaos around him does not feel like a first move now for Bryson Graham. We're going cap on this one, big cap on this one, actually. And then Bulls, Jazz, Wizards 3-team trade rumors have popped up, where the Jazz would move up to number 1 and get AJ DeBonsta. The Chicago Bulls would move to number 2, and the Washington Wizards would slide back to number 4. And in that, they would get future draft capital from both the Chicago Bulls and the Utah Jazz to move down to 4. Whereas this framework of this deal does truly work if Washington is perfectly fine taking whoever falls. If Washington is going into this process and saying, we actually think all top 4 guys have very similar ceilings for us, we're fine with that one. That's perfect. The question would come down to it is what the real cost would be for the Chicago Bulls to move from 4 to 2, right? Movement is possible. Nothing is guaranteed, right? This is the kind of thing that you don't dismiss completely, but you also don't treat like it's going to happen for sure. You can't do that part. So I'll say in this one, the verdict, not cap, not facts. This is a wait and see how the draft board and things develop over this draft combine process and over this next month and how teams look out for it. So don't completely dismiss it, but don't treat it like it's going to happen either in regards to that one. And that leads us to the last thing that I want to say before we get out of here. Nobody knows what Bryson Graham is going to do. That includes podcasters, that includes writers, that includes ESPN, that includes everyone, right? And aggregators also who are taking all of this. Bryson Graham can read the draft board instead of being boxed in to doing any one thing. But I want to say this and be clear. Nobody knows. That includes you. That includes me, right? So anybody who's telling you, oh no, Bryson Graham isn't going to do, nobody fucking knows. So let's stop with that one. At 4, 15, 2 second-round picks, the cap flexibility, the trade options, everything is there for Bryson Graham. That's what you want to be. The unpredictability actually gives Chicago the leverage in this situation, and Bryson Graham isn't going to give that up anytime soon by leaking out what his plans are, if he even knows the fully right now. So let's just take accountability for that. The combine is other way, and the Bulls have a lot that they need to evaluate. Caleb Wilson to continue to look good. Cam Boozer has looked like one of the most winningest players. All that. Darryn Peterson still has the kind of talent that I think people are going to love in this one. But like I said, nobody knows what Bryson Graham is going to do, and that's what a real front office is supposed to do. Don't completely show your hands. Don't be completely obvious, and we'll see what's going to happen in regards to that one. Let me know what you guys feel in regards to all of this. How do you feel about what the future is going to hold for the Chicago Bulls in this situation? Let me know all that down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. Make sure you guys subscribe as well. Like I said, we are now, I think, about 30 subscribers away from hitting our goal of 30,000 subscribers. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you ready for Ken, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.